2019 council meeting to order. Mr. Goodsby, please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Councilmember Cooper. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Beaton.
Here.
Mayor Zelinski.
Here.
Councilmember Goodspeed.
Here.
Councilmember Szymanski.
Here.
Councilmember Grabowski.
Here.
Councilmember Pontiac.
Here.
City Manager.
Here.
City Attorney.
Here.
DPW Director.
Here.
Finance Director.
Here.
Public Safety Director.
Here.
City Engineer.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Public hearings, we have one. Public informational meeting, Rural Development Phase 2 Wet Water Correction Action Plan. The public informational meeting is required as part of the rural development funding and application submittal process. This meeting will provide the citizenry an opportunity to become acquainted with the proposed project as well as to comment on such items as economic and environmental impact, service area, and alternative considerations for the project. No action is anticipated at the conclusion of this public hearing or public informational meeting. Mr. Middleton, I believe you're up. Oh, Mr.
I drew the short straw, so
All right.
I've got engineering support. So we did this same agenda item for you in June of 2018. However, delays through the application to rural development and all their requirements. We've been working on this for over a year. They require that this information, the notice of intent and the public notice, public information be held again within 60 days of our application submittal, which we expect to be within the next week. So just quick updates. Our current National Pollution Discharge Elimination Permit has a section in it which is a wet weather corrective action plan. We've submitted our plan. It's been approved by the at the time the DEQ. Now it is Eagle. We've submitted the basis of design for our projects, and that's been approved. We've submitted preliminary plans and specifications. The state has been working with the engineers hand in hand as those are being developed. The next step for us is to actually apply and receive the funding to pay for this, and then commence construction. Once we complete the construction, we'll remove the last overflow in our system, and then we have to submit a verification report. All those dates that are listed there are included in our permit requirements. So I won't get into a lot of detail. This is just information, and if council or the public would like any more information, that's why we're here, is to answer, and we can expand on it. The permit requires the closure of our last overflow. In order to do that, numerous studies have been completed over the years, and our plan, and that'll set us up to be able to take that last overflow out of service, would include building a new conveyance from that CSO to the treatment plant, storage facilities at the treatment plant, and then being able to treat that stored overflows. Our funding assistance, we've already been approved and are well into the rural development phase 1, which is also which is pipelining and doing some stormwater upgrades. This would be specifically for our phase 2 loan application. Currently, the light blue line is the existing sanitary sewer interceptor. It's a 36-inch pipeline that goes from 5th and Ramsdell, which is where our overflow is located, in a diversion chamber, and it flows down 5th Street to Kosciuszko to 8th Street, and then at 8th and Vine it crosses into the treatment plant. Our overflow from that diversion chamber, which is the red box, is the green line, and at that diversion chamber, excess flows will tip into our existing storm sewer. They go down a block of Ramsdell, they turn down 6th Street, and then they exit into Manistee Lake with the stormwater flows through the Morton Salt property. What we are proposing is new conveyance, so we would keep the 36-inch that is still shown in the blue, but it will not convey the main sewer to our plant. We would build a new 48-inch interceptor sewer that is in yellow. That would be constructed down Ramsdale Street to 7th Street, turn east on 7th Street to High Street, and then we have would obtain a permanent easement from Morton to cross a portion of their property, and then in the next slide we'll show some property acquisition. The red lines show the red boxed in areas show the new headworks to the treatment plant, and then the three circles that are in red would be our storage tanks, and they would have up to 6 million gallons of storage. The new headworks would have the ability to screen and pump 21 million gallons a day, and we'd have grit removal capability of 3 million gallons a day, and we would store up to 6 million gallons. The point of those numbers is that we would be able to store 6 million gallons during a storm event and meet what the state of Michigan refers to as the remedial design storm. So that's an event that would occur in Manistee with the current conditions of our sewer system, and we would be capable of treating or storing and then treating all of those flows. We've said this many times to the public, but this system is also designed with an overflow system so that if an event happens that exceeds that remedial or that design storm, there is a process where it will bypass the full treatment process. It will still have solids removal, which happens at the headworks, and it will still have disinfection before it gets discharged. So those are two treatment methods that don't occur today when we have an overflow. And that is all permitted and legal through the state. There also is a super emergency bypass that would be able to bypass all of that altogether in the case of a catastrophic event. The yellow property is the 10 acres that we've negotiated and have acquired a purchase agreement with from Morton Salt. The acquisition of that land is part of this Rural Development Phase 2 loan. The pink area is a easement that we need for that new interceptor pipe to cross what will still be Morton Salt property, and I don't believe there's any cost for that, but it's shown here as part of the transaction that we've negotiated. The next steps, as I mentioned, are to submit the application. We have to go through the funding review process with the state. Once they approve the construction documents and we're permitted through the state, then we get approval from Rural Development to bid the project, which we anticipate will be probably late winter, early spring, with its construction starting as soon as we can in the spring. The permit requires us to complete construction in the fall of 2020. However, when the state gave us this 4-year schedule to do all this work in, we argued that we should be allowed an extra 2 years so that we could go through and take the appropriate amount of time to secure the funding, design, and construction. They wanted to keep it in the 4-year window so that it stayed within our NPDS permit. And understanding that an NPDS permit is a 5-year permit, but when it expires, the first year after it expires, the state really does nothing with that permit because they're behind in processing those permits. So somewhere during the end of that first year, they negotiate and put in place the permit, which is a 5-year permit. It covers the year behind us and the 4 years in front of us. The city and our engineers have met every single deadline that's been submitted or that's been required of us. The state of Michigan has been quite slow in processing their reviews and getting back approvals and submittals. That's delayed some of this process. We've mentioned that to council in the past, and we've got that well documented. But the real critical path for us has been the rural development funding, and some of the things that they require have taken an extraordinary amount of time to resolve, get together, and provide them the information. So depending on how things go through the rest of this fall and winter, we may bid this out with an alternate completion date into 2021. as long as we get approval from the state. And it could result in better bids because we're really compressing that time frame. With that, I would accept any questions.
Do you have an idea of when we would know whether or not the alternate timeline would be appropriate? Because you'd need to know that before you bid, correct?
We really don't need to know that. We can bid it as an alternate. So we can bid it as the baseline bid with the completion of 2020. We can also bid it with an alternate of 2021 to be able to see if there is any inherent savings. We've already had some of those discussions with the state already. They're well aware that our timeframes are really getting compressed due to the funding. They're not that sympathetic about the funding scenario, but they certainly they've applauded the work of our engineers to stay ahead of the schedule and meet all the deadlines at this point, so.
This rural development loan, is that about 18 million?
We're asking for 18 million on phase 2, yes. And we've increased that amount to the cap that council had approved in the past. And the reason for that is rural development has given us feedback that a lot of the projects that they've been bidding in the last couple of years are coming in higher than the engineer's estimates. I don't know why that would be, except that we could be in that scenario if we have a compressed schedule and a contractor's forced to put more resources on it. They'll put a premium on the price.
That loan will be paid back through the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund?
Yes. And that's up to 18 million, so if the bids come in below that, the final closing of that loan will only be for the money that's required plus a contingency. So if bids came in total package at 16 million, we would not borrow the 18, we'd bill, as an example, would borrow the 16.
Is the current charge for water and sewer adequate to support the loan?
Ed, you better weigh in, but we have set this up with that case. If we have to borrow the full 18 million and we spend all the contingencies, there's a possibility that rates could go up above what we've, the standard 3.5.
Part of the unknown in all of this is the fact that there could be a potential grant for part of this too, particularly if we have to borrow spend the whole 18 million. So worst case scenario would be borrow the 18 million. It is at a little bit lower interest rate than projected. We'd have to sit down, sharpen our pencils up, look at the budget, and you may have to slightly increase those rates a little bit above the 3.5% if you truly had to borrow the full 18 million. But there's so many variables in there right now, it's a little too early to tell. Another thing that we're going to be doing is we did budget some money this year to refresh the financial component of our rate study by the rate consultant that did that back 5-6 years ago. And that'll help as well, but we kind of want to get these loans closed and behind us so we can have a real good picture of that as we go into that process. So it should not have a significant impact either way.
So we also are planning to set up a meeting within the next couple of weeks as soon as our application is submitted with Christine Maxwell, correct? And we believe that she'll be able to give us a good understanding of whether or not we would qualify for grants. Basically, we've run through this with the assumption that all of this will be low interest, a 40-year loan. So if any grant money does come to the city, that's an addition and will help tremendously.
Don't you feel that's gonna be a lot of, people are complaining about the water rates now, all that have gone up, and how are we gonna put more on?
Well, people complain about our water rates, but the city has been well served by doing that annual inflationary adjustment every year. And if you look at our peers around the region, around the state, we're still very competitive. So I think there's a little bit of maybe some misinformation out there. We don't have extraordinarily high rates by any stretch, especially considering the amount of debt that we have on the system. The communities that do have lower costs than us haven't had to take on the amount of debt that we've had. But even with that, our rates are still competitive. So it always, isn't pleasant to have to raise rates, but you have to be able to operate your system and you've got to be able to, meet the state mandates. And they try to run the utility operation as efficiently as they can, and I think Jeff and the engineers and Rick do a really good job of that, but you still have to be able to pay the bills.
Right, but do you think before though we get into a vote on that, that we could get the rates from the other cities to compare?
Well, we've had, several different, rate comparisons have gone around. I don't remember when the last one was, but it's probably been within 6 months.
Yeah, 6 months to a year.
Yeah, but, I really don't know that that is relevant to the conversation, because we have to do this project and we have to be able to pay for it. So I can certainly dig out the information I have and send it around, but it isn't gonna change the fact that if we have to levy slightly higher rates than the 3.5% that we had thought, we're gonna have to do that, but hopefully we can avoid that.
Well, I think, every time we turn around, I think $18 billion, so it is concerning.
Yeah, the one thing that you have to keep in mind, we've got significant bond payments coming off in 2 years, and that is going to help a lot. If we didn't have those bond payments coming off, you'd have to raise the rates pretty dramatic. So from a planning standpoint, the city did that 20-year sewer separation project and did it in multiple phases, and a lot of that debt was 20-year notes. So once those are paid off, that frees up the cash flow to help service the debt on the 40-year-roll development bond.
If I understand this correctly, this isn't, gee, it'd be nice to get this done. This is something we're mandated to do, or at some point in time, we're gonna be paying some large fines, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanna make that clear, this isn't really, we gotta do this. It's just gotta be done, and we have to follow the state regulations, or we're gonna be
Yeah.
paying that money on fines.
Yeah, the phase two really doesn't have capital improvements in it. These are new assets that we're constructing in order to control the wet weather issues as required by the state.
And just to reiterate, the reason that the number's gone up from when we were here, when we did the phase one, is strictly because that's what rural development is advising us to do. And we don't have to, we can approve the 18 million, and if the bids come back at 16 million, we're only gonna borrow the 16 million. We don't have to borrow the 18 million. But it's a lot easier for the feds to de-obligate the funding than it is to add additional funding back to the request. So we basically totaled up between the pilot revenue bond we did, phase one and phase two, we went up to that 25 million limit, which is what council had approved with the notice of intent they did several years ago. But there's a chance we won't have to borrow all of that, and that's what we're hoping for. And by having that alternative timeline, it may help with that as well.
At the last hearing we had on this, the first one, you talked about the bonds being paid off, and that what we had to pay out would be somewhat of a wash once those bonds are paid off. Is that still true? Is it?
Well, it was with the 15 million. With the 18 million, if we have to go up that high, it's gonna be a little bit more, the new payments will be a little bit higher, but it won't be significantly higher. And that's what we talked about, we may have to tweak the rates. Instead of doing a 3.5%, maybe you do a 5% for a couple of years. But a lot of it's gonna depend on what those bids come back on, and, what that environment looks like at that time.
Anybody else? Thank you. I'll open it up to the public. Is there any public who'd like to comment? Please come to the podium, state your name and address, and limit your comments to 5 minutes, please.
Okay, hi, Paul Glasser, 253 Fifth Street. And this is in reference to the golf cart issue.
Okay, we'll address that in a minute. We're on this public hearing right now. I'll get right to you in just a second.
I thought this was citizens' comment.
No, this is just on the public hearings.
Oh, okay.
You're all right. We'll get to
Right
it in
back.
a second. You betcha. On the public hearing matter, anybody else that would like to say something? Yes, sir.
Hi, Ed Tegler, 522 Fifth Avenue. I would just like somebody to address what would be the conditions that would constitute a catastrophic event that the sewage would pass by all of what we would put in for the 18 million and go out into the lake. I just want to know what that would be.
John?
What I can do is, I guess I can quantify it in terms of flows, which is kind of our speak, but, so right now, the 36-inch can convey what, Brian? 5,000 GPM. So the pipe that goes to the plant right now today can convey about 5,000 gallons per minute. When we put in the new 48-inch at this deeper elevation, we'll be able to move about 20,000 gallons per minute. The pumps we're gonna have down at the plant will be able to move 20 plus gallons per minute either to the treatment plant or to the tanks. And so we're gonna quadruple what we can do today in terms of moving flow to the plant. When it hits the plant, we can push 2 to 3 million gallons into the wastewater treatment plant. The remainder will go through the tanks, one after the next. The last tank will get dosed with chlorine, and then that will discharge. So we can move on the order of 4 to 5 times the flows we currently are to the wastewater treatment plant. So that's just lowering water levels and reducing potential for basement flooding, especially in that area of the city.
And these tanks are designed for a 100-year event, a 200-year event?
They're designed for a 25-year event, 3.9 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. That's what the state calls the remedial design standard. That's a standard they require for all cities systems.
Okay, thank you.
With the 7+ inches of rain that we had, would that be considered a catastrophic event, or would that be something in between?
We can honestly say we probably didn't model that specific event. Because of the way I'd probably sum it up is what we're gonna build down at the plant, we'll be able to handle whatever can be delivered to it. So it really gets into the pipes upstream at that point. We've got enough capacity to pump, store, treat, and move back out to the lake at the plant. We'll be limited to the capacity of that pipe. And I don't know, we've ran scenarios with 200-year, 500-year events where we're able to pass that up through the plant. That water gets there. We do see localized surcharging of the system, kind of like we did in the last event we just seen. So that's out there. There's system-related items that are just inherent to this collection system. But what we're doing down there would, probably is going to handle 200 to 500-year events. And every day that we find inflow and we get rid of it, that level of service gets higher and higher. And so that's the goal, is we eventually, kind of get to the point where those tanks can maybe use for some other purpose and not have to store the water. So we're always going to be hunting and finding I&I and eliminating it, which improves that scenario.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Citizens' comments on agenda-related items. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on agenda-related items. Any citizens like to comment? Oh, I think I've seen you before. Hi.
Council, Paul Glasser, 253 Fifth Street, and this is in reference to the golf cart issue that you're probably gonna look at tonight. And looking through the minutes online, I could see where it was addressed, it was introduced or mentioned by the city manager as he was contacted by a citizen interested in addressing council on the allowing golf carts in the city. I don't think it was, I don't know, maybe if he didn't, if he did do address the council in the council meeting, I see where it wasn't. I mean, I can't find it. So I don't think it was addressed by a citizen for the council other than the city manager. And then council had, brought it to the 6th meeting for the first vote. If it wasn't brought to the council by a citizen, why is it even talked about? Why is it even being voted on now? That's my question. If the citizen addressed the council, it should be in some minutes. Maybe you don't keep minutes for the citizens' comments?
Yes, sir, we do.
Well, mine wasn't in there for the last meeting on the 6th.
Well, do we keep minutes for citizen comments?
Yes, we do.
You do? Oh, great. I didn't see it in the minutes. It's not in here, so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Please state your name and address.
Michelle Hansen, address is 387 11th Street, Manistee. Good evening. The Planning Committee and council members have worked to formulate a plan for the cannabis industry to be placed in our community. Originally, it was decided that there would be 3 medical dispensaries, 3 recreational sales, and 3 grow-op permits allowed in the city of Manistee. Recently, that was changed to an unlimited number of permits for cannabis sales in the zoned area on Arthur Street. We feel the original plan of 3 medical dispensaries, 3 recreational sales permits being allowed in the zoned area of Arthur Street is the better step forward for the city and surrounding community, allowing the city to consider additional permits in the future after observing the effects of a limited number to start with seems reasonable. You only get one chance to do this right. Since the effects of how the cannabis industry will impact our community is unknown, is it better to proceed with caution and make changes after we see the results as to how well suited it is for our community, and then determine with the benefit of time and experience before choosing to expand? To start with an unlimited number of permits is not necessary at this time. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to speak to agenda-related items?
Good evening. My name's Eric Piedmont. I reside in Traverse City, Michigan. I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Fresh Coast Provisioning. We had the pleasure of presenting our site plans on 28 and 32 Arthur Street last week in front of the Planning Commission. Hopefully it was the first step towards us getting a retailer's permit here in the city of Manistee. But before I go any further, I'd like to thank this council for the diligent work you guys have done on the cannabis legislation, the police power ordinances in front of you guys. I wish more of the municipalities we had were as welcoming and had the forethought of this body. I'm here this evening to speak against the proposed ordinance changes on 19-20 and 19-21. I understand what the need is or what the desire is for this, but I feel there may be some unintended consequences. As an entrepreneur, creating jobs is my #1 goal. It's my passion and it's reward for my job well done. This amendment is brought with the best intentions, but sometimes we understand the pathway to ruin is paved with good intentions. There are currently a total of 10 applications in the marijuana overlay district, and with this proposed change, I'd presume there will be a few more in the near future. With such close proximity, there will be a race to the bottom. There will be a race from the bottom in terms of build-out costs. There will be a race to the bottom in terms of supply chain and acquisition costs. And there will be a race to the bottom in terms of wages and staffing. And these hyper-competitive conditions favor groups who cut corners, source poor quality or untested products, and groups that pay non-living wages. This isn't what the city wants. The city wants jobs, but it's not just about the quantity of jobs that matter, it's about the quality of the jobs that matter. Jobs that pay a living wage. I believe this proposed amendment can compromise that. Looking a few years down this path, assuming these amendments get passed, there may be facilities that kicked out existing operators, existing businesses in 2019 and 2020, only to be sitting vacant a few years later. It's unlikely that this or any industry can sustain 10+ stores side by side. If more than 3 locations are operating successful in a year's time, this council can always add more permits. Dip your toes in. You can always expand in the future. At our public hearing on the 15th, a resident neighbor spoke up about his desire to tamp down the licenses in this area, or at least consolidate them. It may sound strange, especially coming from me, but I agree. If this city's looking to this industry to create jobs, an alternative route would be to add additional license types allowed by the state rules. This could give the industry more avenues to invest in this community. I ask again, please reconsider this ordinance change. Give yourself the opportunity to choose the operators you want to work with. Give yourself the opportunity to pick the groups that want to cultivate skills and invest in your community. If demand continues to outstrip supply permits, let the leash out slowly, not all at once as this amendment does. Thank you. Hopefully I'll get the opportunity to speak again in front of this body. Take care.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak to agenda item?
Good evening, Council. My name's Tom Swedenborg. I've been a city resident for about 21 years. I live at 562 First Street. I have the privilege of overlooking the harbor, and I'd like to speak on the issue of increasing the no wake signage. You know, I frequently see people hustling down the river, throwing a 6 to 8 inch wake, and I'll go over to the edge of the river or overlook, and I'll just give them the "what's up" sign, and they immediately throttle back. These are the people that know better and just choose to ignore it. So that's really an enforcement issue. But I've also discussed it with a number of people, and they honestly think that the no wake zone is not at the pier heads where you enter the harbor, but rather where the first now existing sign is on the end of the stub pier. And that's simply not the matter. And people don't understand that, many of them. In the 21 years I've been here, I've seen a lot of signs go away as pilings have disappeared. And I've seen signs severely faded and disappear, perhaps for other reasons, vandalism, I don't know. But there is a lack of knowledge. There is a lack of signage. I do feel that the wake is important for a number of reasons, but with our high water, I think erosion is one of them, and that's apt to continue for several years and be an issue again in the next cycle. So I'm asking for you to support the expense of the additional signage so that it's obvious to people that the entire harbor and channel is a no-wake zone. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
My name's Art Perriard. I'm at 9 Cottage Lane in Harbor Village. And I did address Linda when the council, when it first came up. I wrote the letter to FAD, and I have a lot of support among the residents to do so. So I just wanted to be known that I really think it'll be good for the community. I think it's good for the older people in the community, and I hope it passes. Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move right along. Consent agenda. All items marked with an asterisk are on the consent agenda and considered by the city manager to be routine matters. Prior to approval of the consent agenda, any member of council may have an item from the consent agenda removed and taken up during the regular portion of the meeting. Consent agenda items include approval of minutes, payroll, invoices, consideration of ordinance 19-19, adding chapter 6 or 460 golf carts, consideration of ordinance 19-20, amending charters 866 medical marijuana facilities, consideration of ordinance 19-21, amending chapter 867 recreational marijuana.
I'd like to amend, oh, you got more?
Wait,
More to read.
consideration of ordinance 19-22, amending chapter 1420 state construction code, notification regarding next work session, consideration of Manistee Catholic Central Homecoming Parade. At this time, council could take action to approve the consent agenda as presented. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to motion or recommend that we remove C, consideration of ordinance 1921, amending chapter 867 recreational marijuana.
And I'd also like to remove consideration of ordinance 1920 amended chapter 866 medical marijuana facilities. You gotta do that one, you gotta do the other.
I would second that.
Okay, we're gonna remove those two and put them on the regular agenda. We'll take care of that right after.
And I make a motion, we accept the rest of the agenda items.
Sure.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pontiac?
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Schmansky?
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Take up the two items that were removed from the consent agenda. Consideration of ordinance 19-20, amending chapter 866 medical marijuana facilities. The city of Manistee medical marijuana facility ordinance permits up to 3 provisional centers. Under state law, a single business may operate both a provisional center and a marijuana retail at the same location. This means that 3 businesses could utilize all 6 provisional center permits and marijuana retail licenses. Initial interest suggests that a request for provisional center permits and marijuana retail licenses will exceed what currently authorized by city ordinance. The amended to Chapter 866 is being proposed that would authorize an unlimited number of provisioning center permits. However, the number of parcels available in the marijuana sales overlay district is a limiting factor in how many provisioning center permits will be requested. The proposed amendment also limits the duration of the provisional permits to 1 year. As an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. This ordinance was introduced at August 6, 2019 meeting and could be adopted at this time. At this time, council could take action to adopt ordinance 19-20, amending chapter 866 medical marijuana facilities. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, I would like to state that we really have no idea out of the 10 applicants that have applied for the special use permit, who's gonna be successful and who's not gonna be successful. Even if we limited it to 3 and we had to pick 3 out of the 10, for example, and just throwing numbers out there, we still have no way to measure who's gonna be successful and who's not gonna be successful. Maybe all of them would be successful. Maybe a few of them would be successful. We really don't have a way to measure that. This is a new industry for the whole state of Michigan. So I'm not, and there's only 21 parcels anyway in the district. We don't know what kind of customer service skills the staff is gonna have. We don't know how many people are gonna be hired locally that will be trained. There's a lot of things that play into the success of a business. So there could be other businesses that might wanna join you. Maybe a coffee shop or a restaurant or maybe even a clothing shop, something to kind of break up the monotony of that area. That's still all open. It's a commercial district. So I think I'm more comfortable saying it's unlimited. That's my opinion on capitalism and the competition in that district.
Anybody else?
Well, you know, again, my suggestion is perhaps unlimited maybe sends the wrong message. 3 may not be the right number. It's difficult to know. Perhaps a compromise would be that we limit it to 4 or 5 of each of the different. So instead of having 3, we would have 5 provisioning, 5 of each, rather than having a unlimited amount within that district.
Then if the 5 get in there and say that they're not successful, we won't ever know whether it's because they haven't been successful because they've had a poor business plan. There's no way to measure that.
But that's,
And that could just completely destroy the whole concept of having the marijuana district to begin with. If we limit the number and they're not successful, then I don't think anybody will want to do the investment. I think the competition is going to be stiff, it's going to be hard, but I think in the long run, it's probably better.
Well, is anybody on the planning commission listening to the people at Joslyn Cove who said that they don't want anything there? Because, you know, they don't want to be known as a drug city.
What if, I mean, I agree with Mick, saying that we need to put a number. I think it's best if we put a number. You say there's 21 properties. What if we limited it to 20?
or 15, 3 or 5 each.
Right.
That still allows for a tremendous amount of competition as the people just spoke up earlier today, the people who are investing, it's quite a bit of competition, but it still has a limited number, and it doesn't give the impression that we are, willing to, tear down the hotel to bring, more properties in line.
Then I think it's going to be a very hard decision for us to decide who gets them right now.
That may be so, but I think 5 basically makes it, right now we have 10 applications.
And another one's coming up with the
Right.
second wave.
but it would make it less difficult, I think, at 5 than it is at 3. I do agree 3 is probably not the right number, and it does become very difficult for a decision to decide which of the 4 or 5 in each of those categories is the best, because we have, it's subjective, it's not objective at this point.
And I welcome having to make that decision, because we do want to make sure we have the right type of business, what their plan is. If we just let anybody in.
We're not letting just anybody in. They have strict state guidelines they have to adhere to. They have to meet the planning and zoning requirements. They had to meet with the zoning and revise their plans to meet the expectations of zoning and how they want that area to look. For us to sit here and pick the ones that get it, very possibly could pick somebody who's not going to make it. And there's no way to measure that. I don't have a way to measure that, do you?
No, but I think us being elected to sit up here is we get to make the hard choices.
And yet we want to discourage competition, which would be the natural.
Already. I mean, not every store, not every property, I wouldn't think we'd have 20 sitting side by side. So I think 20 is more than enough. But that's just me.
It's too much.
Anybody else? I could just add a little something to kind of confuse it even more. Like we're trying to change the ordinance tonight, what prevents us from changing it 6 months down the road after we get startup, like the gentleman talked about tonight? Do we need to dip our toe in the water and see what the temperature is before we expand? We can always expand. There's nothing preventing us from expanding in the future. What do you want to do? Do you want to just jump in both feet without a life jacket, or do you want to have some reassurance that things are going to move forward in an orderly and timely manner?
And that's why I was kind of trying to pick the number of 5, because that would basically give the planning commission an opportunity to approve based on the current group of submissions if they met all of the other requirements. And it would then limit other applications or applicants from this point forward. And that's why I was saying suggesting as a compromise. It does kind of lock it into the people who have already submitted their applications for the most part. And yet does not make it an impossible decision for the council or for the planning commission to make.
Well, like we've heard people say, and my personal opinion is that this is uncharted territory. We don't know what's going to happen and how quick do we want to jump into it? Do we want to be careful? Competition's a good thing, but that doesn't mean you can't add numbers in that district later. It depends on what you want, council. More discussion?
I would like the city manager to offer an opinion on this.
Well, there are safeguards if council is concerned about the quality of the operators or the business owners. Number one, we have a very comprehensive application packet that anyone that wants a city license permit has to go through. And then it has to be completed to staff satisfaction before there would be a permit or license issued. Additionally, those have to be reviewed or renewed annually. So if there's something that happens that the city's not happy with, whether it's how they operate, how they're, whatever it might be, doesn't mean we have to renew that application. So there are some checks and balances, because when we initially put together that application, our primary concern was to make sure that we could approve the best qualified to operate in our community and an additional check of they're only good for a year, and they got to prove themselves, and if there's some problems in that first year, or any subsequent year, we don't have to renew it. So there are some checks and balances.
Can we send this back to the ordinance committee to revise, or?
Mr. Saylor?
Well, you're going to vote on this motion, and if the motion resulted in council deciding not to adopt the ordinance, then sure, I mean, something like that, I suppose, could be sent back to the ordinance committee, whatever council's direction is.
Is what I'm asking. If we decide that we want to change it to however many numbers, we can do that here. And
Today, we're at the second reading on the ordinance that's been presented, so I think it's an up or down vote on that ordinance. If it was voted down and council's direction was, we're in favor of amending the ordinance, but we just want a different number, certainly that can be something that can be brought back.
And I believe there is a motion on the floor, it's been supported to approve that, so that has to be addressed at least.
Well, I'll just add another, some thought, it says here. If, with the amount of marijuana dispensaries, grow facilities that are opening up in northern Michigan, there seems to be a big influx of that. No matter where you go, communities are looking at it. At what point do you have so much competition that a person can't be successful and wouldn't invest? Am I kind of clear on that? I mean, competition's good to a point where nobody can make a living and have to close down, and then we have nothing. So, just a thought.
I don't think it's appropriate to throw it back to the ordinance committee. There's only 3 people on it. So I think this is, and if we vote this down tonight, then we have really, I think, set the timeline back for the forward progress that these applicants want to make. I think that'll have an impact on their timelines.
Mr. Taylor, at the city level, or I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, at the city level, how many do you have to approve? If there's 10 permits here, do you have to approve 10 permits?
Well, as the ordinance stands right now, we have only 9 permits to give out. So in that,
There was 20, do you have to give out 20 permits?
no, we're limited by the ordinance right now.
If the ordinance has said you could give out 20 permits, do you have to give
No,
out 20
we have,
permits?
they have to satisfy staff that they've presented all the information that we've requested, and we're comfortable with that information.
If they satisfy all the requirements, or all the things that are required, do you still have to issue a permit?
There's no reason we can't give it out. If they apply and they've gone through they've got a special use permit, they've gone through our application process, and they meet everything we ask them to meet, there's no reason that I'm aware of that we can deny their request.
But they still have to go through the state, correct, for licensing?
They have to get state approval, right. But at the local level, if our process is get control of the property, go through the planning commission, get a special use permit, request an application, and if you complete it to our satisfaction, then you get a local license. And then you have to operate within the city, you have to get state licensing.
So what other control do we have as far as someone starts out doing really well and don't seem to want to follow the rules? Do we have any recourse?
Well, they're going to have to file the special use permit. They're also, in the application and the ordinance, there's certain things that they have to comply with. And if they aren't in compliance, we would have some enforcement abilities.
And that could be up to shutting them down, right?
I can't remember exactly what the final recourse is.
Mr. Saylor?
I would agree with that. I mean, we have an ordinance that details the obligations of license holders or permit holders, and if they're not fulfilling those obligations, then yes, we could take action to shut that down or suspend or revoke the permit or license.
And refresh my memory if you can, each one that we approve, there is a permit fee,
There is a permit fee.
and that is a yearly amount?
That's a yearly amount,
And what is that amount
$5,000
per year?
per year.
Is there any other cost? that we
That's
would-
it. That's just that $5,000 takes care of staff, time, and resources to take care of the permitting process.
I really don't need to talk because everyone knows my opinion.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? So, but it's in my district and I'm, you know.
Anybody else?
I just want to say it again, that I think that if we don't pass this motion tonight, then we have really set back the timeline on some business plans out there. That could be more harmful than having an unlimited amount.
And I agree, I would rather set it as an unlimited for now and then come back with an ordinance to readjust the numbers rather than to stall the process that's already started.
Anyone else?
So if we say yes, but we want to revisit, we can do that and have the ordinance committee say, it's yes for now, but you need work.
Well, I think there's got to be some certainty for the applicants. If this is something that's going to be revisited on a real regular basis, that might curb any interest in or curb some interest in the community, not knowing for certain what might change. That would be my only comment.
I'm sure, though, that they understand that this, and I've heard it expressed, that this is something new. Things may change, and they may change next week or next month, or maybe next year. It's a learning process for all of us. So.
Right.
Anybody else? Please take the roll.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton?
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Nope.
Councilmember Szymanski?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
No.
Councilmember Pontiac?
No.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of ordinance 19-21, amending chapter 867 recreational marijuana. The City of Manistee recreational marijuana ordinance authorizes up to 3 marijuana retailers. Under state law, a single business may operate both a provisioning center, a marijuana retailer at the same location. This means that 3 businesses could utilize all 6 provisioning center permits and marijuana retail licenses. Initial interest suggests that the request for provisioning center permits and marijuana retail licenses will exceed what is currently authorized by the city ordinance. Similar to previous agenda items, an amendment to chapter 867 is being proposed that would authorize an unlimited number of marijuana retail licenses and marijuana micro businesses. However, the number of parcels available in the marijuana sales overlay district for these businesses is a limiting factor on how many businesses will be requested. The proposed amendment is also limited to the duration of the provisional license to 1 year. As an ordinance, 2 separate readings are required. The ordinance was introduced at the August 6, 2019 meeting and could be adopted at this time. At this time, council could take action to adopt ordinance 19-21, amending chapter 867 recreational marijuana. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item?
Again, I still think that limiting these to 5 instead of 3 would justify both the competition and limit the amount of businesses, especially in this side, because these are really the new part of the business. We already know, we've had caretakers growing and selling marijuana products since 2012, maybe before. And basically, the medicinal marijuana business is by prescription. So having an unlimited amount, again, it's gonna adjust itself because again, there's only so many people on those prescriptions. This is kind of an open-ended field where we really don't know what the demand would be.
No, we don't, and I think it's just, to limit it to a number like 5, we're gonna, I don't know what criteria you're ever gonna use to figure out who's gonna have the best successful business plan. Obviously, it's a new position for the city to be in, and it's a new position for us to have to make these kind of decisions, but I really think at the end of the day that we have to see how they perform and how serious they really are about being in our community.
Mindset as the last one, for this one.
Anybody else? Please take the roll.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton?
Yes.
Mayor Zielinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
No.
Councilmember Szymanski?
No.
Councilmember Grabowski?
No.
Councilmember Pontiac?
No.
Motion failed.
Thank you. New business. Consideration of applying for a low-interest loan to fund Phase 2 of the city wet weather correction action program. The current permit includes requirements to complete a wet weather corrective action plan or program. This includes a 2-phased approach to reduce inflow and infiltration at its source and to convey, treat, and stored excess I&I to the water treatment plant. As part of this program, the city has secured Phase 1 funding through rural development and requires a second loan for Phase 2 to finance the work. At this time, council could take action to approve the application for USRDA loan application in the amount not to exceed $18 million, and if successfully awarded, authorize the mayor and city clerk to execute the necessary documents. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac?
Yes.
Mayor Zielinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Consideration of a license renewal with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to allow annual fireworks display on the South Breakwater, Manistee Harbor. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has requested a renewal of a license agreement with the city of Manistee for an annual fireworks display on the South Breakwater located in the harbor at First Street Beach. The current license agreement expires July 31st, 2019, has expired. The administrative fee to renew the license is $350 for 5-year term. At this time, council can take action to support and approve the license agreement with U.S. Corps of Engineers to allow an annual fireworks display on the South Breakwater, the Manistee Harbor.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none, please take the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski?
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac?
Yes.
Mayor Zielinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Consideration of an intergovernmental community pool agreement for the operation of the Payne Aquatic Center. The original agreement expired on August 12, 2019. A new agreement has been reached with the Manistee Area Public Schools. This agreement is for the most part identical to the original agreement. This agreement is for 5 years and will automatically renew it in an additional 5 years unless otherwise amended and signed by both parties in writing. The city annual contribute will remain at the same $40,000. At this time, council can take action to approve the new intergovernmental community pool agreement with the operation of the Payne Pool Center and authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the documents. Do I have a motion?
Yep.
I'll second.
Put this into a work session.
Are you saying you would like to What would you like to do, Mr. Kabuski?
Well, I'd like to, that we sit down and discuss this contract and some of the other problems we got going with that.
Are you making a motion to table this?
Yes.
Is there a second for the table? I have a first and second for the table. Please take a vote. Please do the roll call.
I think they have to table it to a date certain, right? You're gonna have to table it to a date certain, so I guess if you're looking at a work session, it would be the September, I believe it's the September 10th, 10th work session.
Yeah, the 10th. Okay, please take the roll.
Councilmember Grabowski,
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper,
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski,
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski,
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac, Mayor Pro Tem Beaton,
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Consideration of the purchase of a 2020 Ford Explorer. The city of Manistee has provided a vehicle for staff members to utilize for travel and training. The current 2007 Ford Escape was scheduled to be replaced in the next fiscal year. However, it has experienced mechanical issues and requires replacement. Feedback from staff utilization has resulted in recommended purchases of a 2020 Ford Explorer purchased through Michigan Deals. At this time, council to approve the purchase of a 2020 Ford Explorer from Grono Ford in the amount of $29,647. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
This is the vehicle that staff uses to go out of town on trips, et cetera.
Yeah, any city employee, council members that have business outside the city, this is available for their use.
And I understand the old one really needs the whole transmission.
Yeah, it was the mechanic's opinion that there was no value in putting in the transmission based on the condition of the vehicle. Yeah.
Just curious how many miles it had.
Travel out of the car a year.
Yeah, it's, the requirement is for staff that's gonna travel, that if that vehicle's available, they take that, unless someone else is using it or it's in for repairs. So they're required to use it.
Did we buy this vehicle new?
It's my understanding we did, yes.
How many miles does it have on it?
Jeff, do you have an idea?
I don't remember the exact amount, but basically what the mechanic said is, when he looked at what the cost to replace the transmission would be, if we replace the transmission, the vehicle would still be less than the cost of that brand-new transmission. So there's no value in that. He also said that with the high mileage that's on it and the normal wear and tear that occurs on those engines, there will be other failures that occur. A brand-new transmission won't get us very far, so.
Personally, I don't think the city should have 12-year-old vehicles that we're entrusting to people to drive. Especially when you're using it for longer trips typically, right? So
if we send somebody on a trip and we pay them mileage, what are we paying them per mile?
I think it's the IRS rate. I don't know if it's 54.5 cents, 55.5 cents a mile.
So we pay no matter which way we go, right?
Well, we're gonna pay the employee for using his or her vehicle, or, we have our city vehicle that, we have the normal operating costs of gas and maintenance and repairs.
When the motor pool committee met, I think it was a consensus that this was a much cheaper long-term investment than paying those mileage out individually to staff.
does it have any secondary purposes other than for TDY travel?
Well, employees use it for travel, for conferences, for training, for various activities, and they get used quite often. We actually have a specific calendar so that you can schedule and book that.
Well, it's lasted 12 years. I think we got a lot of good use out of it.
And we stretched it, tried to get the 13th year out of it. It didn't happen.
I assume we've price this with a dealer, and we probably can't beat Michigan deals. My past experience tells me we can't.
Yeah, when we've discussed this with the local dealers, they're not competitive with the My Deal contracts. So, the past couple of years, we've gone exclusively through the My Deal contracts.
That number, I can tell you right now, since I just bought a 2019 Ford Escape this year, that 29,000 is a really good number for what I had to pay.
Anybody else? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Pontiac?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski?
Yes,
Councilmember Szymanski?
Yes.
Motion passed.
thank you. Consideration of a purchase of no-wake signage for the Manistee Harbor. The city of Manistee has received several complaints from boaters violating the no-wake zone in Manistee Harbor. The Harbor Commission requests as part of the enforcement to analyze needs for improvement and additional signage. 12 large no-wake signs and 8 small no-wake signs were recommended. The Harbor Commission recommends council approve the purchase of direct new no-wake signage for the Manistee Harbor. This will assist with notification and enforcement. The total cost would not exceed $1,600. At this time, council could take action to authorize the purchase of no-wake signage for the Manistee Harbor. Do I have a motion?
I'll make it.
You got it?
No.
Let's try it again. Do I have a motion?
Yeah.
Second.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just have a question about enforcement. I mean, I agree that we need the signs, but how do we go about enforcing this?
I run really fast and I catch up to the boats.
I would almost believe that.
Yes. No, I've had specific discussions with the county, and I actually had a discussion with the DNR today to try to focus some efforts on our issues that we've had coming into our harbor. So there are only 2 boats that actually enforce, the Coast Guard doesn't, so that's our enforcement efforts. I've also made recommendations that if there is violations, someone could give, an MC number or a charter name. I'd be glad to go over and have a discussion with them to advise them of the
Do you have
violation.
any tickets that we've written in the past year?
I am unaware of any tickets.
Would it be you issuing the ticket, or would it be the county or the DNR?
County or the DNR?
Can we issue tickets?
Yes.
Okay, so if we have an MC number, can you issue a ticket based off an MC number and being able to identify the driver?
I'd have to observe myself. I'd like to leave it more up to the professionals, and I'd like to do more of the, give them a little notification of that they are violating that the first time.
Well, is it mostly fishing boats that are violating it?
Well, today, we had our discussions, and I was being told pontoon boats are even going a little too fast, even though they don't normally create that type of wake, so it isn't normally our charters. It's a mixed bag.
I think a lot of it has to do with understanding what slow no wake means and what the law is talking about. Yes, sir. Do you have something?
Can I address this issue? Because I've enforced it.
Yeah, well,
All you do is stand by the Legion or anywhere along the lake and you yell, "No way!" And they slow down.
okay, thank you. I think understanding the slow no wake is important, and maybe we could do some education in that area. A slow no wake is, you've got to be going slow no wake within 100 feet of a dock or shore. You can maintain, as long as you're maintaining a forward motion and not creating any whitewater, kind of a new thing they come out with, they call it whitewater now, and not creating a wake. You have to be at a minimum speed, just enough to maintain forward motion and control the boat. That's what I read as a definition of slow no wake. So I think a lot of people don't understand that and what that means. They don't think they're creating a wake in the center of the channel, but they are within 100 feet, and that is a violation in itself. I personally would like to see more enforcement. It's eroding our shoreline. We just need to do a better job, I think. So thank you, I appreciate it. Anybody else? Seeing none, please take the roll.
Councilmember Cooper?
Yes.
Mayor Zelinski?
Yes.
Councilmember Szymanski?
Yes.
Councilmember Pontiac?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Beaton?
Yes.
Councilmember Goodspeed?
Yes.
Councilmember Grabowski?
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Concerns and comments. Citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on municipal services, activities, or areas of city involvement. Citizens in attendance shall be recognized by the mayor for comments limited to 5 minutes. Letters submitted to council will not be publicly read. Is there anybody like to comment? Yes.
Hi, my name is Seth Pratt, and I reside at 355 Second Street. And I'm here tonight to address the council in regards to the property located at 353 Second Street. It is a duplex rental. And for the past year, I have been, along with my neighbors, subjected to many things from one tenant in that location. I've tried to reach out to that tenant to address the problem. I've reached out to the landlord, who has made it very clear to me that as long as he gets his rent money, he's not worried about it because he does not live there and does not live by it. I have come to the police department numerous times, only to be followed up with twice by police officers, when I was told on many occasions somebody will contact you the next day. I have reached out to our city manager's office numerous times, probably at least 10 to 15 over the year. He has never contacted me in regards to my concerns, and there have been emails that have been shared. I have asked questions to make sure I'm following the proper protocol and procedure, and nobody's been able to answer what the next step is. I have documentation that I can share with you that address the concerns, blight, and street ordinances that are not being enforced. When I brought it up with one sergeant who had contacted me, he told me there was no regulations on the streets. We're welding trailers, we're constructing trailers out of garage doors, we're keeping trash, tires, dead fish in a bucket, unmarked cars that don't have a license plate or tag that are just allowed to be sitting there for weeks. One vehicle without a license plate or tag sat on the street for a month and was literally demolished, like taken apart on the street. There are officers that go by my street every day. Nobody ever stopped. Last Friday, there was an incident that I resulted in calling the police because he started blaring music, started his snowblower, and was revving his car for 4 hours. There was no ticket issued. It was so loud when I got a hold of dispatch, they asked me if my house was being fired at.
Was being what?
Fired at, like gunshots. Because that was with my windows closed. And I had calls from 3 neighbors asking what was going on. I have reached out to the tenant in the downstairs who resides at that property. She's an attorney. She has also said she is moving because she's reached out to her landlord, and they're not enforcing anything. There has been construction, a pile of construction materials that has sat out on the city property for over a month and a half that have nails and screws coming out of it. So at this point, I'm wondering what needs to be done. Other residents are willing to write letters. They're willing to start a petition. They were willing to come to meetings. Tonight's meeting didn't work out for them, so if we need to come back. But I've looked at the ordinances, and there are ordinances to address these issues. It just doesn't seem that we're enforcing them. And I feel like at some point, it's going to escalate because he continues to add more items.
Say he, that's the landlord or the tenant?
That is the tenant. The landlord is aware of it. He owns a construction company, and he has worked literally at the property right across the street from the 355 or 353 Second Street all summer long. So he's seen the state of it. On Friday, when the police officer did show up, he told me that he's very concerned for the landlord because if the tenant was to leave, he'd be left with a mess. But there was no comment about area residents. And as of today, if anybody goes down that street, there are 3 vehicles up on jacks, literally on the street. So it just doesn't seem like we're enforcing things. People can put out a couch and leave it for 3 weeks. There's no tag on it. I mean, I'm literally looking out at my street and somebody's left a toilet for 4 weeks, sitting up next to a car up on Jack's. And that's right on Walnut. So I don't know what I'm doing. If this isn't blight, I'd like it to be defined that it isn't blight or there is not an ordinance issue, because nobody's told me there hasn't been. But I can just tell you, when I have come in, you can talk to 3 different people and get 3 different answers on what direction you need to go in and what needs to happen. I've been told we're not enforcing blight ordinances because we're redefining it. I've been told there's no blight officer. I've been told the blight officer isn't in. I've been told that, you know, there really isn't much you can do. It's a civil matter. At this point, I have canceled house projects. I was gonna have my house painted and a new fence put up, and I'm not doing that this year because my neighbor has literally destroyed my fence that's currently existing by putting garage doors, car parts, and everything up against it. I've chose to reside in Manistee. I was raised here. I've worked in Mason County for the past 7 years. I've chosen to live here. But if something doesn't change, I don't know that I'm gonna continue to do that. I mean, when you can't sleep one night because he's out there at 2:30 in the morning, revving car engines and working on cars, and you call and nobody shows up, and that's a daily occurrence.
Thank you very much for your
Yep.
time, appreciate it.
You said that was 253 or 350?
350.
353.
Anybody else?
Me again, 253 Fifth Street, Paul Glasser. Last council meeting, I brought up that there were 3 cars hit on my street in the last year. That's up to 4 now. Since the last meeting, 4 days after the last meeting, it got to 4, plus the 4 mirrors that I lost on my truck. So that's now we're up to 8. What I asked for last month was a gate to close westbound traffic on Fifth Street. What I'm asking for now is the city to look at it, and it's gotta be taken care of. I'm parking up on the curb now. I hope it's legal. I don't know if it is. But I'm parking on the curb because I got a nice pretty red truck and I don't wanna screw it up. And another thing, this is something else. I think there was a motion and seconded about the aquatic center, and it wasn't acted on. It was just dropped. Thank you.
Anybody else? Just for information, the Aquatic Center issue will be taken up on the September 10th meeting.
Work session.
It's been tabled to the September 10th meeting. Anybody else? Seeing none? City Manager.
Yeah, just a couple of comments in terms of Mr. Pratt's complaint about blight. I know that was brought to our attention, or at least to my attention, in an email a couple of weeks ago. It was referred to the police department. They need to go over and take corrective action. They have been monitoring. Apparently there was another situation, and that's being worked on. And in fact, I've asked, prior to the meeting, I'd asked Public Safety Director Koza just to report out to council on, because I know you were all copied on that email. Secondly, I know Mr. Pratt said that he'd contacted my office 10 to 15 times and I have not returned his call. I'm going to check with the secretary tomorrow. That's one thing I take great pride in, is returning calls. And I'm going to check. She makes duplicate messages, and I'm going to see if I've missed them. I doubt that I missed 15, but I'll take a look and I'll let you know. That's all I have.
Mr. Saylor.
Nothing, Your Honor, thank you.
DPW, anything further? Is he gone?
No, yeah, he asked if he could leave, the contractors making the final layer of asphalt on 12th Street, and he wanted to be there.
City Engineer.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Public Safety.
Okay, reference 2nd Street, the first time it was brought to my attention, Officer Hayner was sent over there specifically. He actually made contact with the landlord who was across the street. The vehicle was tagged outside that was on the actual street, that was remediated within 7 days that are allotted, and everything else that was blight, that was reported as blight, that was identified as blight, was also remediated. Most recently, there was another email that was forwarded, I think within the last 7 days, reference a blue pickup truck that was in the side yard. I immediately sent Officer Halliard over there to have that tagged, which it was. He actually had a face-to-face discussion with the resident there about the issues that have been brought up about his blight. I drove by myself, I didn't see anything on the right of way. There was a lawn tractor out front that I also had Officer Halliard address with him and to have an honest discussion with him about what he's leaving out and how it can be considered as blight. So when they have come to my attention, we have addressed them immediately. Questions on the Second Street blight? I'd like to also bring up Mr. Grabowski. We've also had a one-on-one discussion with the other individual that you had brought to my attention, so that's in progress.
Okay, good.
Any questions for the chief? Thank you. Mr. Bradford?
I wanted to let council know that we've been able to restore the Fifth Avenue beach camera. The reason I mention that is the beach cameras and our channel camera are the most visited pages on our website by far. And we've updated the software on them, so they're much more functional. They actually will do some time-lapse photos now, and they've been getting a ton of traffic. So if you want to go to our website and click on the beach camera, harbor cam, you can kind of see the new functionality that's there. And we're pretty excited about it, and possibly could be adding some more cameras in the future. It helps to drive traffic to the website and just raise awareness. That's all I have.
Thank you. Did I miss anybody?
I just want to remind people that we do have our website now that tracks blight. So if you have an issue, you can go on that website and put your concerns down. We need to use our tools that we do have. And I do know we do have a blight problem, especially in my district. And we just got to stay on top of it.
Mr. Kowalski?
Well, I think Jeff ran over to 12th Street because tomorrow they want to strike the place and get it open by tomorrow. Good.
Mr. Smansky?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Go?
Nothing.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I would like to make a suggestion to the city council. Blight is the #1 complaint that I have received repeatedly on different properties throughout the city. I don't think we have a handle on what is blight to one person and not blight to another person. And I would really like to think about establishing an ad hoc committee of citizens to help us, because we need to have a better idea of what exactly is a violation and what isn't, because a lot of things do seem to slip through the cracks, and I think sometimes it's just a judgment call, and I think maybe it would be helpful to have an ad hoc committee. That's what I got.
Any comments?
I like that idea.
I agree.
I don't have an issue with that. I think the state regulates health and safety in their blight law. They don't regulate blight in the community, a city, township. They leave it up to those people to regulate their own, what they consider blight. It looks like we have a consensus. Can you make that happen?
How large of a ad hoc committee would you like?
I'd say
Mayor Pro Tem?
It'd be nice to get representation from at least 4 corners of our city.
I would like to have a represent from each district.
Okay,
I'd like to be on it.
And naturally staff would be there.
okay, we'll get working on that.
Mr. Goodspeed?
I have nothing.
I have nothing further. That we're adjourned. I'll take a motion. Do I have a motion? I got a motion. We're adjourned.
They were gonna keep any of them at 3, I think, the recreational.
Yeah, I think
Because like you said before, medical's gonna go, I think that's gonna go out.
Yeah, that's right.